Hey, it's Shabes, and welcome to a special edition of AniTube Digest, where we talk about the Director Project, the second yearly Director Project. I guess it's helmed by Popture. He's the one that posted the initial trailer, I guess, for it, and I guess adding him to get in this playlist. But basically, it's a series where any creator can post a video essay about the director in question, and it'll be added to this playlist of sorts, and kind of similar to Nova a bit. Only the director this time is one Hayao Miyazaki. So it's a bunch of Ghibli videos by mostly people I've never heard of. There is an accented cinema video in here that I haven't seen yet, and I'm familiar with his work, but and I think I have seen something from Broey Deschanel. But pretty much everyone else I don't think I've seen before. And surprisingly, only one of them got taken off for copyright. It seems, so far. But the playlist is in the description. I'm going in order. I'm skipping the trailer thing at the beginning. And I'm going to do the same thing because it worked out so well last time that I'm recording and then pausing to watch the video and do that. I think it's just more efficient. This time, I'm not going to do that for Digest regularly, just because it's too... This is very demanding, but efficient. But the first one is by the host itself, called Popture. And they've been doing videos on media for a while now, but it seems to me that this is the first time they've talked about anime. And he admits in the video that he had never experienced really much anything of Miyazaki, and he binged all of his movies. So that's good. I'm happy about that. And he noticed a pattern of strong female characters, except one. And he talks about Porco Rosso and he explaining feminism and toxic masculinity, you know, and it kind of shows off those like misogynist things that Porco says at some points. A little cringe face and things like that, and I'm like, oh boy. You know, I'm a little okay. And he is glossing over the anti-war things to focus mainly on this, and I think the analysis by the end is pretty sound, but for a lot of the video he is explaining feminism and then explaining toxic masculinity, and I guess he does lampshade it by having this kind of funny gag where, like, well, for one, for most of the video, he happened to get like a pig nose, and he's kind of wearing it. That's kind of cute. But he's like explaining feminism to a woman as like, you know, like mansplaining, and it's a gag, and it's funny. It is kind of funny, but it's also just like, yeah, it's a lampshaded thing. It's like, yeah, that is what you're doing. You're just explaining feminism to me, and then talking about how. Look at Disney films. None of them have strong female characters early on, and later they kind of fill. I think he tangents a little too much talking about Disney and whether they get feminism correctly. I don't know, but it was like weird that he would go on to be like, Miyazaki has all these strong female characters, blah blah blah. List them. But the whole time I'm like, you can talk about Porco Rosso? Because it's like they have strong female characters in that movie. They're not the focus, but they're there. And then he does bring up at the end that, you know, when he actually is talking about the movie, and it's like, yeah, all the females are all the females, all the women are are strong, capable, and like affable and nice and like good. Inherently, it seems, and then all the men are brutish, selfish pigs, you know, like all the male characters. And I'm like, yeah, for the most part, I suppose. And I guess that is funny. Dang it, man. Dang robocalls. Yeah, but like he gets it towards the end, but the most of the video, and then he does the gag again, but he's explaining toxic masculinity to a man. And it's funny, but like it's a visual gag. But it is still like you're explaining this sort of deal. Hey, I mean that's fair, but yeah, I don't know. I think that was a little weird, but I guess he kind of gets it by the end and kind of like talks actually about the film. I feel like ever since I've seen Steven's video on Porco Rosso, every Porco Rosso video I have, I kind of my guard up because I'm like, so that is unfortunate in that sense. But no, I am glad he talked about it. It seems like it's the only it's the only Porco video in this list. So not bad. Yeah, pretty all right. Let's move on to the next one. Broey Deschanel with Why Miyazaki is a True Romantic, and she focuses on Kiki's delivery service, talking about romanticism as a concept and the sublime and those sorts of things. She seems very well read, and I remember watching her Isle of Dogs video, and I was really interested. I really liked it. It was really interesting. She seems incredibly well read and pulling a lot of really good quotes, and seems like a really good understanding of Miyazaki and where he's coming from. I like the connection she was making with he doesn't really hate technology because he's a fan of aviation, and the real thing is that like he cares more about flight as a concept and wants to achieve it in the most kind of simplest form possible, like the least technology. And I think that was really interesting, given the designs of his aircrafts for protagonist versus antagonist. You think about Nausicaa, and her form of flight is just very personal and simplistic, and then the Tolmekians and like everybody else, basically all the flight all the aircrafts are incredibly bulky, lumbering, huge, intimidating type of things, and there's a contrast to that. So that's really, she doesn't mention that particular notion, that just Nausicaa is my favorite film of his. But yeah, I really like that connection, specifically with Kiki, where she's, the broom versus the blimp. Dirigible. Yeah, I really liked that reading, and yeah, I really liked that video. It's very simplistic, but I think that was a really well-read one. That was really good. There's an Accented Cinema video on Princess Mononoke, Writing Humanity, and Writing Humanity I think is a little cliche of a title personally. It's kind of a YouTube title. But he's talking about how realistic Miyazaki's films are, specifically Mononoke, all the little details and the mannerisms, that it's even more impressive that it's an animation and stuff. And also, not just in the humans, but also in the depiction of nature and a lot of the prophetic messages that he's putting in his films. I'm noticing kind of like a pattern with all these videos so far, which I do like a lot. And it's interesting. It actually kind of relates to what Miyazaki does compared to the rest of anime. A lot of people like pointing out that he's very much not an anime guy in the same way. Like a lot of like people who make anime, at least in Miyazaki's perspective, have grown up watching anime and want to imitate that, and it kind of becomes kind of cyclical and like an Ouroboros of sorts. It becomes shallower and shallower, and he's taking from real life, as Accented Cinema says here, but also European philosophies like romanticism from Broey's video. And also commenting on real world issues like feminism and toxic masculinity, like in Cold Popture's video. I'm noticing with all these videos, they are taking a lot of real world specific attributes and stuff. And I also like that all the videos so far have been very much holistic. Like they are talking about Miyazaki's films as a whole and not just zeroing in on one film specifically. Like they are, all of them are focusing on one film as just just to stay focused, really. But I think they're demonstrating that they've seen a lot of them and they kind of know what they're talking about, sort of deal, which is good. But I was just reflecting on it, how it's like compared to what we were doing with Novid. Granted, a lot of people in that challenge had either never made a video or had just started making videos and stuff like that. And this isn't like this shouldn't be like considered a blanket statement of sorts, but I feel like a lot of times anime YouTubers were just focused on the show itself and on anime, and that's all we were really consuming. And that's certainly the case with me, at least. I don't tout to like try to compare this to film or literature or anything, because I am mostly experiencing anime exclusively, and it is kind of, it has its drawbacks for sure, because it does have that, you don't have that worldly perspective sort of deal that I think these videos have, which I think is interesting. I don't know, something to think about with like, especially the fact that like these are, besides, you know, Extended Cinema's at least talked about anime before, but I don't think Broey Deschanel has like a Whisper of the Heart profile picture, so I assume that she may have talked about anime before, but I'm looking at her channel and no, that was the first anime video she also made. And we'll see with the other videos, right? I'll first time I've heard about any of these channels, so I'll definitely key into that. But I think that's interesting if like non-anime YouTubers talking about anime gives a kind of a different, refreshing feel to it, which is cool. It's not something I usually cover, which is nice. Listening In is a music YouTuber, well, you know, film score YouTuber, talking about, you know, various scores from other movies and stuff like that. And this is the first time he seems to have talked about anime. And I thought it was really impressive for the first half. I thought the editing was really sharp and really engaging. I liked his points about bringing in Joey Seiichi's quote that I hadn't heard of, which was how real life doesn't have music, so scoring those scenes seems really unnatural. So he's trying to make it as natural sounding as possible, like it's very organic, which I really like that. I like that point, and you know, a lot of it's intentional, but like I kind of lost it when he did this thing with Spirited Away. It's one scene, and it's like it takes up the majority of the video, to be honest. It feels like it, at least. He's playing the scene when Chihiro learns who No Face is and that he's eaten 3 people, and he rescores it with like a random different score, and he doesn't really give any explanation of why he chose that. It just seems like kind of a different weird thing. It doesn't give any, yeah, it was weird. And then played it with the actual scene. But I did like the editing choice there, where for copyright reasons, which was very safe because it's Ghibli, right? He just used stills to, and that was it was kind of like a storyboard in a way, to depict the scene, because it's fine because it was just the music you need to pay attention to. I thought the experiment was different and interesting. But I don't think it had as much. I don't think it really got a lot of basis of like, wait, why are we doing this? And what's the rationale for the first example? He just kind of like shows you the 2 examples, and he's like, I think we agree the second example is way better. You know, and I'm like, yeah, it is. What? It's like you're setting it up. Like, you know, it didn't have a lot of weight to it, of contrast, I guess. I don't think he explained it well enough of why he chose that first example. And then, yeah, it just kind of wraps up really generally, I guess. I thought it was had really good momentum and really good presentation and everything. I was really fucking with it until that example, and I was like, wait, that's just me. I think it's a decent video for sure. Check it out. I watched a video from DazzReviews talking about Nausicaa, the uncomfortable conversation. And the uncomfortable conversation he's referring to is environmentalism. I like that he started the video with saying he's not much of an artsy guy. And you can tell with it, I think it's emblematic of his channel, I think. No offense. It's more like, you know, you see what he's doing, putting out very regular content on animation, like very contemporary animation stuff. Kind of like what Saberspark's doing, but he's had a history of doing some video games in the past and stuff like that. He's talked about anime exactly one other time, it seems, and he was just recommending Dr. Stone. So it's not the old, but it's rare. He doesn't usually talk about anime. And I really liked a couple of things about it, but overall the video was very rambly and not structured. I think it just kind of felt like an ongoing paragraph. It just kept going on and on about it. Which, like, you know, what can you do? but it's just like it's like one of the longer videos here. It's 20 minutes. I don't know, but I did like some of the bits throughout with him talking about his personal anecdote about being colorblind and how he can still tell vaguely that the blues and the greens are so saturated in Miyazaki films, like real life doesn't look this good. I really like that personal anecdote, and I think he seemed to imply that like Nausicaa had a little more resonance to him because it doesn't have much green in it. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I also liked the tidbit about this one Japanese vlogger who kind of put on a mask and went into Fukushima, or like the town where the nuclear disaster happened, and everything's it's kind of the Winterfell type. I don't know what to call it. Nuclear winter, I guess. It's not really nuclear winter there, but basically everything's frozen in time, and it's kind of similar to Nausicaa in that way, which I think was really interesting. But yeah, like those points were cool, but like, I think he's talking more grand scale about these ideas, and not so much about the film itself and what it's specifically trying to cite and say. I think he kind of glosses over and just kind of chalks it up as like, it's great, it's masterful, it's throwing all the heaps of praise on it, which I appreciate, because I love this movie to bits. But I thought the substance was a little all over the place, not and kind of difficult to follow in that way because it wasn't as compelling. But what can you do? I'm happy you talked about Nausicaa for 20 minutes. That's kind of cool. Eyebrow Cinema put out a video, Action and Pacifism in Castle in the Sky, and it's sort of a beat-for-beat analysis of the use of violence and how Miyazaki portrays it, which I think is really interesting. And I think it was pretty sound for the most part. I was talking about, how like with Castle in the Sky, he outlines each scene that has some depiction of violence in it, and then he's pointing out these things, how it's like, no one's actually dying in this scene, with the robot like rampaging through the castle and stuff like that, the captured one, in the middle of the film, like he doesn't actually seem to kill anyone, even though there is a lot of destruction everywhere. And a lot of the violence is off screen, like the two actual acts of violence by the characters is the bottle smashing at the beginning, and that gets cut away, and using the destruction spell, and the villain dies off screen, sort of deal. I thought it was all really sound stuff and interesting. My whole thing with it was, though, it made me really interested to see this perspective with his other films, because there's other actions of violence, specifically with Nausicaa and Future Boy Conan, which, like, the more I reflect on it, I don't think Conan actually does that sort of violence, but I don't remember. But I think it would be interesting to illustrate that, or to kind of showcase that, especially because it is a little bit of a prototype Castle in the Sky of sorts, which I think is interesting. But yeah, I liked that. I thought it was a really sound analysis, and yeah, good video. Also, like, I don't know why at the very, very end of the video, he mentions, like, hey, I used the dub, but if you're gonna watch it, please watch it with subtitles. And I'm like, dub better than sub. It's like, yeah, I guess it's one of the least liked ones in terms of his dub, I guess, because of the lead two characters. But you can't beat Mark Hamill there. He kills that role, man. I love it. Anyway, checked out Network 1901's video on Why the Wind Rises is Miyazaki's masterpiece, and the channel itself seems to be mostly a Disney history and analysis channel. At least it's very nice that they have it in the logo, not in like the channel cover, but on the like in the video, like after the intro or something plays, is Disney history and analysis. And looking through all the videos, it's like, oh yeah, it is all Disney stuff. And they have talked about Ghibli one other time, which was just if Studio Ghibli should leave the Disney deal, and I haven't watched that video, but that does sound interesting. This was a a simple essay video talking about Wind Rises and the significance that it has connected with Miyazaki's real life, which is definitely true. Although I don't know if he necessarily goes into a lot of his work ethic and the kind of the narrow-minded passion that he shares with Jiro. I don't know if he necessarily taps into that here in this video. I think he's mostly talking about kind of like other factors like his mother having pneumonia, sort of thing. And I think it's sound. It seems mostly like plot summary a bit, and not too much other stuff going on for me to latch onto personally. I'm sorry I don't have too much to say about it. I like this movie a heck of a lot, but I don't know. I just thought that this is one instance where I think a overall like a sense of his other movies would have helped with this video, like the other videos, like a couple of the other videos have had so far. Just because with this one, I think it also doesn't do himself many favors. Just prefacing the video with that. Not only was he not experienced in Japanese animation, but he had seen several of his movies and they weren't resonating with him very much. He wasn't really getting them, and Wind Rises was the one that kind of like he's his true great film kind of thing. And I don't know, that whole thing kind of takes me out of it as a Miyazaki fan. I'm not like a stan of his or anything like that, but it's like, it kind of deflates my expectations a lot and disengages with me personally. But not too bad. It seems like an okay video. Geekritique, yeah. Nausicaa and the Rise of Studio Ghibli. I gotta say, I think this is the best looking thumbnail out of the group. Not that the other thumbnails are poor, I just really gravitate to this one. I really like it. And surprise, this is the only video so far that has even mentioned Future Boy Conan, which is a blessing. Although I do really like that he really went into his career specifically and actually mentioned Toei and Lupin and everything. Although he doesn't really mention that he, had directed part 1, and he says that like Lupin is so different and he hadn't settled on his style yet. And I'm like, well, maybe it's because it's a franchise movie that a lot of people are working on. And that was his directorial debut. He didn't have the sort of artistic control that he has on literally every one of his other films, specifically Nausicaa, because it's his original work too. But all of them are really part of his original work, and that's what makes him so much of an auteur. But anyway, yeah, and there's little bits like that that I think he was kind of outstretching his knowledge in places, because it is a very studied and detailed history that people have paid very close attention to, that has a lot of nuance that it's not easy to convey in a video necessarily. But props to attempting it, at least. I think he did a solid job. I think it also came off a little plot summary a little bit at points, but I did like that he was incorporating his filmography as a whole, even his manga as well. But yeah, there's certain little it felt like a lot of tidbits and little trivia things here and there. Didn't feel as cohesive in that way. But I think it's very informational and interesting. I also want to mention that the channel seems to be mostly about kind of geek culture and things like that, and I think he may have talked about anime 1 or 2 other times. He's kind of flirted with it, but most of his videos seem to be centered on Marvel and DC and Star Wars and things like that. But this was a pretty cool video. I actually really enjoyed it. I just finished Ariana Alexis's video on why My Neighbor Totoro is boring. Oh boy. And she really just lays it out at the beginning. It's like, I find it boring and a little creepy. And I was like, oh, come on. And I do like that she is very transparent about the singularity she has in this perspective. Although I also do kind of find it unengaging. I wouldn't go so far as to call it boring, because like boring I think is a very antagonistic term. Uh, it's one of those things that I referred to in a couple other I've kind of explored in other places, but this idea of you're saying something in a YouTube video and you say something that is a live wire, is something that you kind of don't want to put out there, because then the audience very likely is going to kind of recoil and not immediately be sold on what you're saying. They're going to be coming off everything you say afterwards is they're going to be on their guard. There's going to be some hesitation there. They're like, and they're challenging every little thing that you say, and you don't want the audience against you that way, because they're not going to engage with it in a fair manner, right? So like when you say that it's boring at the very beginning, it's very antagonistic. But it is the subject of the video, so I get there's very little other ways to do this. But like when she describes how she found it boring, and she went onto Facebook and Reddit and like kind of posted how she wanted to know how other people thought of this movie and to see if she was alone in this opinion. And it turns out she, at least according to her mutuals, she was alone. She posts all these contrasting opinions of hers from other people. But then she kind of just going in to try to rationalize it and try to figure out what it's doing that she finds boring. And so she kind of looks up these terms that is the first I've kind of heard of them talked about in the context of an anime, and I think she's referring to it because it's because it's Japanese. She can use these terms like ma and what was it? Because I looked it up because I literally never heard of it before. Kisho Tenketsu, which I guess is like a 4-act structure that's more it's derived from Chinese narratives, folk tales and stuff, and you know there's traces of it in Korean and Japanese, and she uses the Chinese word, even though there is a Japanese equivalent in and it's called, I have the page pulled up, it's Kisho Tenketsu with a name, it referred to as Kisho Tengo. It's like a different word basically, but she's using the Chinese word, and so there's that little thing in the back where I'm like, like do you think Miyazaki is taking from Chinese cinematic or literary terms? It is interesting, and I didn't think it was necessarily incorrect, but I was a little on my guard and a little confused, not totally sold on the idea of using those terms to describe it, even though it does seem kind of accurate, I guess. I don't know. She does include some quotes from Miyazaki, so she did do some research, right? And I do commend her for that. And she does. What's weird though is that like what she ends up kind of describing as is the reason why she's personally disconnected is because her perspective in looking at media, she needs to be constantly stimulated by whatever kind of media. So by being so laid back, and she doesn't once mention the word slice of life, by the way. I don't think she's familiar with the term. But they know I think it's just her displeasure for that particular kind of story. Like she probably wouldn't fuck with like Arya or something. Maybe she would. That'd be kind of interesting. But like she describes this one thing of like everyone loves the sequence of the girls grabbing onto Totoro and them flying around, but all she's thinking is anxiety because she's thinking about like grabbing onto the short fur and what if something happens and Totoro's creepy face or something. And she's like, it's my Western sensibilities. And or something like along those lines. It's my uh, familiarity with Western culture. And she constantly is referencing Iron Giant as a comparison. I'm like, I guess this is like your favorite movie of yours, but okay. She never verbalizes it. For example, in the Iron Giant, she doesn't really say that. She just uses footage of the Iron Giant to contrast the points. I'm like, okay, but to me, it was like, so your cinema sins. Like you watch a scene like that, and you're not thinking of the joy and the wonder that the girls are feeling, but the fact that they could fall off at any moment because logically they're grabbing onto this. Okay, I don't know. It's certainly the most challenging and bold video that I've been watching, and certainly better than Mid. And a couple of these videos are a little bit. The general Miyazaki video, I guess. I do like the bold take, but it was just kind of like, personally, even though I do kind of feel the same way about it, but like, you know, she at the end she does make that thing that's like, I find it boring, but the movie itself isn't boring. It's like, okay, it's just my opinion then, huh? Okay. There was one other thing that she did that was, she had this tidbit, because she was trying to make another point of contrast, and she was trying to connect it to Land Before Time, which is a movie she really likes. And she does say, it's like, I think this is a hot take, but I believe Don Bluth is the Hayao Miyazaki of Western animation. And I thought about it, and I was like, I'm initially repulsed by that, but the more I think of it, that's not the worst take you can have. Because, like, he does really care about animation for animation's sake, like Don Bluth, Hayao Miyazaki. And they're all pretty original. They're pretty original things, original films from Don Bluth that I'm aware. I'm not too familiar with Don Bluth personally, but, like, does he sort of write the movies the same way that the Miyazaki does? I think so. Or perhaps not. I don't know. But the fact that they are original films and they're, in that sense, I just think there's a very significant degree of difference in success between the two. One of them's won an Oscar and has at one point gotten the highest grossing animated film in Japan a couple of times. And then there's Don Bluth, who unfortunately was pitted against, very, very vocally pitted against the single institution that defines animation in the West. I know, like, Hanna-Barbera and there are other, and Warner Brothers Animation. There are other institutions, but none of them are Disney. Let's just say that. And Bluth is going up against Disney here. Which is admirable, but it's, I don't know. But I don't know. I guess it's not the worst take, but I just thought that was an interesting point to make. But, again, I think it was a little abrasive at points, but it's bold and interesting, I guess. Maybe if you agree with it, maybe you'll fuck with it. But yeah, I don't know. I think that was certainly a more interesting subject. Senero is just kind of a general film YouTuber, it seems, and he hadn't seen any of the Miyazaki films before, so he binged all of them, which I think a lot of these guys seem to have with prepping for making a video like this. They kind of like, I should probably see his others and stuff like that, which is fair. And so this video is called Discovering Miyazaki, watching every Miyazaki movie for the first time. And yeah, he goes through all of them, and it's just very general review and his reactions to it. He doesn't summarize any of them. Thank God. It's really a lot of his reactions, and I like this little bit and this part, and that didn't do so much for me, and then that sort of thing. Didn't give it a grade or anything like that, just kind of his impressions on all of them, which I liked. It was very charming, seeing each title card come up, and then he would just kind of burst in with like, what a gorgeous film, or what an action-packed, or like, kind of some differences and stuff. It felt very varied in a lot of, even though, like, I think he had similar reactions to all of them. He liked all of them. I think there was a couple that he was a little let down by. Lapida and Ponyo, I guess, weren't his favorites. But he did like them. And liked the rest of the movies as well. Pretty cool, and there isn't too much else to say about it. I enjoyed it as someone who had seen these movies and like wanted to see a newcomer's reaction, and was like especially when he starts with Totoro and he's like, oh, that was cute. I was like, okay, he's gonna like all of them. You know, not like Totoro was the most divisive movie. I guess Ponyo is, I think, technically the most divisive, but like I was like, okay, if he's going into it with that kind of open mind to it, and all right, I trust it. But and yeah, he had pretty positive things to say about all of them, even though he was like let down by a couple aspects and wasn't as engaged with certain things here and there. But it was all pretty honest and pretty digestible and good. I enjoyed that. And the last video in this playlist, because the last one in the playlist is unfortunately got taken down by Studio Ghibli. Which I was going to say, I'm surprised how many of these actually have made it so far. Unfortunate for that last one. I don't know who made it or what it was about. Don't remember. But Bookritique is the last one, and apparently she is married to, I think it's Geekritique. Because it's like, well, it's the same type. It's like the same like type of name, but also whenever she's showing footage, it's the same rolling background that Geekritique used in his video. So I'm making a very safe assumption here, but you know, whatever. But I really liked this. It was about Nausicaa again, just like Geekritique was also about Nausicaa, interestingly. And the video is called Miyazaki from Manga to Masterpiece, and she's comparing the manga to the movie, which not as many people have done, surprisingly, that I'm aware of. As my, you know, and some people really do. A lot of people do have that belief that the movie is good, but the manga is the full experience and is kind of the better thing out of the two of them. But I really like the nuanced, even-handed perspective that Bookritique had here, where she's mentioning a lot of positive aspects and changes from the manga to the movie and how that affects it. But also that I love her observation that the movie does summarize arcs that are in the manga fully with individual scenes, and they kind of give you the full experience of the manga, but in the 2-hour rational runtime. You know, like, you know, of course they have to make it succinct. But also I liked her observation about the difference with color and how important it is to the series, and regardless of medium, and how only one of those actually has color and the other one does not. Although she does very much praise the artwork. And she's like, it's taken me a long time to read it because it's like it's I'm just staring at the art. It's so gorgeous, sort of deal. And I feel that. I remember that when I was reading it. Yeah, but like I really liked her setup here, like her set, and as she was kind of flipping through the manga, she had like this poster that I have along with it, and like a nice setup as she was like a really good way of presenting the manga. That's not very typical of most manga YouTubers, I guess. So, you know, they're just going to take the pages, right? But I really liked that, actually, the very tangible feeling. And, again, the very nuanced perspective I thought was fantastic. I actually really, really liked this. Oh, the other thing was what I really appreciated that she said was she really respects Miyazaki, and she thinks it was a smart, like, she's happy that, like, he went on to be an anime director more so than a manga artist. Not that he's a bad manga artist at all, but you can tell that he cares a lot about the freedom that animation gives you to be able to move the face and place it wherever you want, and time it in such a way. I think the control that Miyazaki has in films, and he does demonstrate in his films, I think this is a really good point, that she doesn't necessarily say about about all of his films, but the fact that he does really control every aspect about his film, very, very closely. That amount of control, I think, is reflected in what she's observing here. That like you can tell it with he's liking exploring the expressions and things like that, and what animation can give you. So she's like, as much as I love the manga, I'm not like begging and wishing that there was a manga version of every one of his films, even though there is one for Wind Rises, which I did not know. I actually did not know there was a Wind Rises manga. Interesting. I should look into that. But I love his manga work too. But I agree. Overall, I think his talent really did lie in animation. But I thought that was a really great point. And also another observation she made here, which was like the only time. It was actually kind of the only time that I guess actually never mind. I think Eyebrow Cinema did have a lot of really good observations about Laputa, but her point about the parallels in the film where Nausicaa has the scene with Tato, like kind of like calming it, and then Yupa sees that and later on uses the same type of technique when he's preventing Nausicaa from committing any more violence using his own hand. And she's like, he takes the bite from Nausicaa the way Nausicaa took the bite from Tato. And I was like, oh, I actually had never made that connection. That's really sharp. That was really good. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. But I really liked this video. I think it may have been my favorite one. I liked a lot of them. But I think I was the most delightfully surprised and just delighted by this particular video. I actually subscribed. She started very recently too, and is the smallest. I think she has the smallest subscriber base out of anyone in this list of creators. So I'm definitely supporting it. I also really love book to film comparisons, and she seems to do a lot of that with various Disney films as well. So I'm fucking with it. I really like her. I really like the videos. So I'll probably stick around actually. But the rest of them I thought they were really good. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. That'll be that edition. I know it wasn't 2 hours. I'm fine with that. But yeah, that was cool. I think that might have been my favorite one actually. More I'm thinking about it. But I think Broey Deschanel's was really good. Accented Cinemas was good. Geekritique was decent. Yeah. And not to shit on the other ones, right? Of not mentioning them, but like the most enjoyable experiences I thought with those, if you wanted to get an idea, I guess. Anyway, you guys, I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. Yo, peace.